until recently attended for many years, as his job at QCYC made it difficult to get to the city for lunch. When Al Ray Jr., an old dear friend, was skipper, he made a couple of presentations. His last presentation was in March 2015, when he spoke of the good, the bad, and the ugly of yacht deliveries. Don retired as a club manager in 2014 and now works as the Toronto representative for Lee Sails of Hong Kong. Most of his sailing experience was racing J24s, Echels, and Stars. He has also raced on ocean boats in Thailand, hence the picture up here on the screen, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. Don has a Transport Canada 60-ton commercial captain's ticket. Can't read probably. In the summer of 2014, he began doing deliveries with Captain Dave Matthews. They brought a 34-foot powerboat up from Cape Cod to Toronto. Sadly, that was Captain Dave's final trip. Later that fall, Don and Dave's right-hand man, Andy Anderson, delivered a 40-foot Catalina in the company with the owners from New Bern, North Carolina, to Bocas del Toro in Panama via the Turks and Caicos. Since then, Don has made several passages, including an Atlantic crossing from Tenerife to Barbados on a Lagoon 45 as part of Julie Cornell's Atlantic Odyssey rally exactly 1 year ago. In his presentation today, he skippers a charter boat in the Bay of Naples and along the scenic Amalfi coast. Please give a warm Shellback welcome to our speaker today, Don Ferguson.
Thank you for having me here. Bit of a come down, I think, from what you had last week with the tribute to George Cuthbertson. I know Rob Mazza very well, and he's an excellent speaker, and so I'll try to keep up to his standard. I'm a big fan of his, the writing that he does in, for instance, the Old Boat magazine. His writing on yacht design is of interest to me. As a racing sailor, I'm always interested in what makes a boat go fast and improves the performance of the boat. So how does one go from being a star sailor to skippering a charter yacht in Italy? After I retired at Queen City Yacht Club, Dave Matthews got me involved in doing some deliveries with him. Dave worked for me as one of my captains. Queen City, as you know, has its own tender to take the members back and forth to the island. And it was by driving that boat that I was able to get my commercial ticket. This is the power boat that we brought up. Then I did the trip to Panama. And then eventually I was introduced to this gentleman, Rick Butler. Rick started Grassroots Sailing, which is a sailing school up in Lake Simcoe. Rick teaches basic sailing as well as the intermediate and advanced cruising standard. And it was through Rick that I got my international cruising certificate, which is what you need to be able to bareboat charter in Europe. And Rick had an assignment to skipper a charter boat in Italy, and they had chartered 4 boats, but they needed an additional captain, and so I was invited to join them. Many of you people probably have visited Italy, and if you went south of Rome, you probably had a chance to go to the Naples area and drive the Amalfi coast and see the wonderful sights there. Usually if you're on a tour though, you spend maybe a day in Sorrento, you go to Capri, you drive along the Amalfi coast, and then off you go again. And you never really get to experience the location and the scenery there. The cruising area is very compact and fantastic. We were located here in Castello di Mare, right down in the south corner of the bay. And I like to compare it to cruising in Ontario. Going from Castello Mare to our first stop in Procida, up in the north end of the bay, was about a 4-hour sail. So in a way, it's like going from Toronto to Niagara on the lake. Ischia is right next door, so that's like going from National Yacht Club around to Ashbridges Bay. Then it's another 3 or 4 hour sail down to Capri. It's all very easy and doable, line of sight. It's deep water, so you're not going to run into any shoals or anything like that. We flew over via Air Transat, which is a good charter airline for this type of trip. We landed in Rome, took the train into the central Rome, and then the Frecciarossa train to Naples Central Station. It's a distance of I think 140 miles, which is like from here to Perry Sound, and it took an hour and 10 minutes. Hitting speeds of over 200 kilometers per hour. Beautiful train. Once we arrived in Naples, I was traveling with a young Russian fellow, just the two of us. So rather than take a taxi or whatever down to Castello di Mare, we took the local train, and that was the commuter lines there that I was showing. This train was right there at the central station. You just went to Garibaldi Station, which was an underground connection. And this little local commuter train, very bare bones, bare fiberglass seats, stopped at every single little station along the coast. The portly old conductor got off, looked around, nobody there, blew his whistle, got back on the train, and it trundled on to the next stop. But it was an experience, and I kind of adventurous. I like doing that sort of thing. So this is our crew. The fellow with the garish sunglasses is Oleg, and I got to be careful with his name here, Nakarakova. Oleg publishes lifestyle magazines for Russian speakers in the Toronto area. And all of the people there, with the exception of Rick and myself, were Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, all Russian-speaking people. And they were, Oleg and several of the people on the crew were students of Rick's courses, but as I say, they didn't have the qualifications, and so they needed someone like myself to skipper the boat. This is Castello Mare di Stabia, beautiful rustic area, and we had a Bavaria 50, very nice boat. This one worked out well for us because it had 5 cabins. We had 2 married couples in our crew, so they got the 2 aft cabins. We had 2 single guys, so they got the berths on the port side. We had 2 single women, so they got the V berth up front, and I had the starboard bunk all to myself. Rick, on the other hand, had a Beneteau 50, and it just had the 4 cabins for the 8 people, and he got to sleep in the anchor locker up front. Now, what they did when they chartered these boats, and it's a little bit of a warning, they actually went through a yacht broker, a yacht charter broker, who organized the boats rather than going through a company like Moorings or Sunsail. And so this charter guy, broker, what he does is he pulls together boats from different companies and puts together the package. And they did it kind of at the last moment. So we ended up with boats that were less than standard boats in terms of the quality. The way the charter boat business works, Sunsail, Moorings, which by the way are the same company, they get their boats directly from Juneau or Beneteau. They get them brand new, they're custom made, specifically for their specifications. And then after 4 years, or 5 years at the most, they then put them up for sale to the general public, or to what is known as second-tier charter companies, who then buy the Sunsail boats, brand them in their own company logos, and then operate them for another 4 or 5 years. The company that we were dealing with here, I think, was the 3rd tier, and these boats were in pretty rough shape. Poor Rick, they couldn't get the mainsail to come out of the furling mast. They literally had to drag it out, pull the sail down, refeed it in, and hoist it up again. We were supposed to get checked out by the mechanics. The mechanic actually didn't work for the charter company that we were dealing with. He worked for one of the others in the area, and he hung around for a bit. Rick asked him too many questions. He threw up his hands and walked away. And so the lady came down from Naples, and she said, well, okay, we'll get somebody organized and everything, and we'll get everything fixed, and you can leave tomorrow. And by the way, I want 3,000 euros cash as damage deposit from each of you, plus about 400 or 500 euros to pay for the linen, the outboard motors, and things like that, which is pretty much standard. Although the 3,000 euro cash deposit was not really standard. A 50-foot charter boat for a week is going to set you back about 4,300 euros. You divide that by 8 people, it becomes pretty reasonable. And of course, the damage deposit is returned to you. We convinced her that we would give her our visa numbers. She wrote them down on the contract, but I think she probably had no way of actually processing the visa. So I got home to Canada and I checked my visa bill straight away, and obviously there was nothing there. And as far as qualifications go, I flashed my Transport Canada license to her, and her eyes kind of glazed over. She said, that's fine, that's fine. Good to go. So the next morning, we were supposed to see the mechanic, and the rest of the company had all gone off to Pompeii to do the tour there, so that worked out well. No mechanic showed up. The young lady finally came back and she said, okay, take the boat, you can go to Procida, and there'll be somebody to meet you in Procida. So we set off to Procida. These are just scenes of Castellamare. One thing that's very evident when you're cruising the bay is Vesuvius. Wherever you are, there it is in the background. It's very impressive. Here we are approaching Procida. By the time we got away and got going, it was late in the day, and it was getting almost dark by the time we got there. One of the people on my crew was a gentleman named Mikhail, who was a factory ship captain out of Vladivostok, and he and I had a little disagreement as to rules of the road. As we were coming into Procida, a big ferry was coming out, and it was pretty evident that he was going to cross our bow. Now, normally you would pass port to port side, but in this case, I realized that he wanted to go that way and we wanted to go this way, so I made a left turn and worked on the racing sailor's rule of gross tonnage. In other words, he was a whole lot bigger than we were, so I was just going to get the hell out of his way and make it very obvious that I was doing so. But Mikhail thought we should have gone the other way around. One of the things that you do when you're cruising in the Mediterranean is Mediterranean mooring. And this was my first opportunity to do one with a 50-foot boat. And it was dark by this time. So Rick went ahead and he got his boat parked. And in the meantime, I was going around the harbor and trying the bow thrusters, just playing with them a little bit. And then it was my turn. I backed all the way down the slip, turned it around, backed it straight in. Perfect. First time. First time lucky. But one of the things that they do now is you don't have to drop an anchor before you back into the mooring, which was the old traditional way of doing the med mooring. Now they have mooring lines anchored to the seafloor, and there's usually somebody in a dinghy chasing you down, and as you back in, they run up, they pick up the lines, they hand them up to whoever's on your bow, and you just back in and then tie off, and it's really, really easy. So these are some scenes of Procida. This is the Abbey San Michele Arcangelo. And on the south side of the island is a little town called Coricella. And there's a bay there which we'd originally intended to anchor in. But we chose not to because normally the winds in the Mediterranean at this time of the year, and this was, I think, the second week in September, are from the northwest. Basically what they call a tramonta, although tramonta tends to be more northeasterly. But in fact what we were getting was Labetio, which is a southwesterly wind. And so our whole concept of where we were going to spend each night kind of got reversed. And so this little bay here off of Coricella would have been very exposed. So that's why we went into the Marina Grande and Procida on the north side. Beautiful little town, all pastel colors. One of the things this group liked to do was go swimming at every opportunity. And what we did was we went around to the bay on the other side, and I'm looking for the name of that. Siriciello. and we anchored there. This is one of the other crew. This actually is a local boat with an Italian skipper on board. It's a Hansi, 50-foot Hansi. Again, more swimming. This is our crew. And then we set off the next, after the swim, we went to Ischia, if you recall from the map, which is right next door. Rick was delayed because when he got to Procida, and the mechanic finally had a look at his boat, they realized that there was a badly leaking through hull in one of the forward cabin washrooms. And so what they did was the next morning they actually careened the boat right in the mooring, in the slip, far enough over that they could pop out the through hull, stick in a new one, and he got on his way, but he was delayed. And they said to me, go to Florio, which is on the west coast of the island, because the marina there is expecting you and they'll give you a special deal. The mechanics in Procida said, you know, we know these guys and everything like that. So we get to Florio and nobody else shows up. The islands here, by the way, are all volcanic. There's a whole ring of volcanoes from Vesuvius all around through Naples. Procida is volcanic, and Ischia is volcanic, and you can see that it's way up in the clouds. We did get a deal here. It was only 60 euros a night instead of 120, but we were the only ones there. A little tricky to find your way into the harbor. The charter boat that we had a chart plotter, but it's down on the nav station. I'm helming the boat, and I don't really want to leave the helm to go down and look at the chart plotter. Fortunately, one of our crew had a large screen Samsung smartphone with all the navionics charts on it. So when we approach the harbor, sometimes when, you know, any of you who have been cruising are probably familiar with this. You look at a harbor and all you see is the rocks or the cliffs or the buildings or whatever, and you're saying, where's the entrance? I can see on the chart where the entrance is, but everything kind of all blends together. But fortunately, a ferry came along and bombed straight into the harbor, and I said, okay, there's the entrance. So we just followed in. A little hazy there. There's the big ferries. That's one of the drawbacks of cruising in this area, is that there are lots of ferries and they're going fast, and you have to kind of keep your eye out for them. Stopped again to go swimming. We finally caught up with the crew who had all gone to a different town on the north side of the island, Casamicciola. One of the nice things about Ischia is the thermal spas, and my Russian group were really big, not only into the swimming, but into this luxurious spa kind of lifestyle. So they were very into that. This is that castle again that we saw in one of the shots. This area was settled back in the 10th century by the Normans. It was then taken over by the Angevins, which are French, and later on by the Aragonese. So this is the Castello Americanese. One of our crew, Stas, brought along a hand line, you know, the little plastic spool that you use for fishing. It's not a rod and reel kind of thing, just a simple line that you throw out. And he threw out about a 4-inch silver lure, and bang, straight away we caught this little tuna. I remember seeing a cooking show, David Rocco. He was in that little town of, gotta go back to in Procida, the little pastel town. And they were actually cooking these fish. As you can see, it's about a foot long. And you just throw the lure in the water, you drag it for 30 seconds, and bang. We caught, I think, 5 of these. There's a similar fish that we caught as well that looks more like a mackerel, but is very similar in size. And within 20 minutes, we were having sushi. We then headed out to Capri, and that was a nice sail. About 4 hours, maybe 3.5 hour sail, close reach, all 4 boats together, racing along. And interestingly enough, our Bavaria seemed to be the quicker of all of the boats. They all had in-mast furling, which is not a great sail to trim because it's got new patents in it. But because all of the males on my boat had taken some of Rick's courses, they were very keen to make the boat go as fast as they could. And so that plus whatever little racing tips I was able to give them meant that we seemed to be the best performing boat. But it was a gorgeous sail all the way over to Capri. As a ship's captain, you can indulge me here for just a minute. We tied up on the very last finger dock next to the main channel, and this guy is coming in, he's backing in. He gets to this point and he drops his anchor, and he backs into a slip with about 2 meters on each side of him. Just a piece of cake. This is the Marina Grande. Originally we were going to anchor out here. We hadn't budgeted for staying in the actual marinas. As you approach the cliff wall, you're about 10 boat lengths out, and the depth sounder is reading 100 meters. So you go in a little further, maybe 6 boat lengths out, all of a sudden you're in 12 meters of water. You keep creeping in, okay, it goes to 8 meters, 6 meters, and you're about from here to that building across the street, maybe closer to the cliff wall, and you're finally in a shallow enough depth that you can drop anchor. But what happens if the wind shifts? You're going to be sitting up on that rocky shore. The other issue is that the harbor entrance is right here underneath these lights here, and the ferries are coming in one after the other, and they're kicking up big wave and everything. The crew on my boat thought about it for a little while. It was going to cost us 180 euros for the one night to go into the marina. They passed around the hat and they said, let's go. So we went in and we anchored in the Marina Grande. lovely marina. I mean, absolutely breathtaking. Beautiful showers and everything like that. They have power and water pedestals that are very high tech. What you do is you go into the marina office, you pay for everything, you get a card, magnetic card. You then stick it into a machine that's out in the lobby, and you charge it up with minimum of 10 euros. You stick a 10 euro bill in, charge up the card, then you go back to the boat, you stick it into the pedestal, and now you can get your power, shore power, and water. Very, very, very sophisticated.
So the power is
Yeah. I couldn't get my card to work, and the Italian boat, the Hansi, was right beside us, and he said, just plug it into my pedestal. So I got free power that night. These are just general scenes of Capri. Right in front of us here, you can't quite see it, is a funicular, which takes you up to, there's the funicular, takes you up to Capri-town, up on top of the hill. This is the station where you arrive. And this is the Piazzetta, which is probably the most expensive real estate anywhere in Italy. I didn't even look at the menus there. I can't imagine what the cost was just to sit and have a cappuccino there. Interestingly, Capri is a place where people come on the ferries from Sorrento, or they come from Naples, and they all pile in the morning. They go up the funicular, they do the tours and everything, and at 5 o'clock they all leave. The people sitting up here are not the tourists that came on the ferries. The people that are up here are the people that are living in the hotels, paying 500 euros a night. And so they can afford, and by the way, there's all the shops around here, the Gucci and the Versace and everything. Handmade leather sandals, flip-flops, for 250 euros. But if you go back down the funicular, there's restaurants along the quay that are now empty because all the tourists have got on the tour boats and have gone back to the mainland. And so we kind of wandered in there, and the manager came out, this lady, and she almost fell all over us, you know, pulled together several tables for us. We had one little table just for our wine bucket, you know. And she just served us the most fantastic food. We were the only people there. And it was very, very reasonable. Had some wonderful wine. And then she brought out desserts on the house with the limoncello and the little liqueurs and things like that. So that was a really great experience. There's a little Fiat down on the quay that you can rent to beetle around, although I'm not sure I'd want to drive on the roads there. Just more general scenes. And again, indulge me, I showed that ship coming in, the private yacht coming in. Now here they are going out in the morning with the guy in the inflatable running around shepherding them out. This big guy coming out again. The captains have these fold-down nav stations outside with their little joystick controls. There he is going past our 50-foot area, which looked very small.
How long was that boat?
It had to be 120, 130. And it wasn't, I mean, there were dozens of them. By the way, a 50-foot boat is about the minimum size that you'll find in this area. Anything smaller, they just, I don't know, they don't recognize them. So then we did a little tour around the island. There's lots to see in Capri. If you've been there, there's the Roman ruins, the Villa Jovius that Tiberius built. There's the Blue Grotto, which is a bit overrated. One of our crew decided he was going to go and do that, and we had to wait for him to finally show up. He was much delayed and came running back very apologetic. Anyway, we went around the island. This is where we'd originally intended to anchor, which is called Marina Piccolo, and it's not really a harbor or anything like that. It's just a very, very shallow inlet where you can anchor, and then some rocky outcrops where you can moor a dinghy and then get up to the town, and then take a cab or hike up the hills. So the general scenes of Capri. From there, it was a very short sail across to Sorrento, and again, we had intended to go to Amalfi, but because of the winds, we decided to go around to Sorrento, which is on the north side of the peninsula where it was sheltered from the wind. And here we did anchor. These are all the beautiful hotels on top of the cliff. They have, in some cases, exterior staircases down, or elevators built into the cliffs, which take you down to bathing areas out in front of the hotel. And this is where we anchored, kind of a shingly beach. Again, you can see the rocky landfills there. Those have seawater swimming areas or pools in behind them. There's one of the external staircases coming down. Some of these shots I didn't take myself, and you'll obviously see which ones they are. This is looking down onto Sorrento, and you've got Vesuvius in the background. I don't know if, has anybody been to Sorrento? Yeah. I think Sorrento was really my favorite. The beautiful, here it is, the Piazza Tasso. So we spent one night there, and then we went around the peninsula and headed down the Amalfi coast. And got all these little towns along the way. There's a group of islands there called the Gallo, which are famous for the sirens that Homer wrote about in his Odyssey. And it's absolutely breathtaking how high up the cliff some of these villages and towns are. And this is Amalfi. This is where we came in and spent a day. We went swimming again. Then we went into the harbor, and this was a steal. We went into the harbor, we anchored in there, tied off there, and they charged us 10 euros. They said you can stay till 5 o'clock. They allowed us to fill the water tanks and everything, all for the 10 euros. But they said you got to be out by 5 because the charter boat companies are coming in. And my group, of course, was late getting back and sweating and everything. But while I was sweating, I was watching the people coming in with the sunsail boat. And what they would do is they would come in and they would slow down, and a guy would come roaring out in the inflatable, climb on the boat, take control, roar in, spin it around backwards, and left, right, left, and into the docks. And then you'd come barging out and hop on the next one and take them in. Very impressive. Walking along the quayside in Amalfi, stopped at this little cafe, grande, and had some beer, looked down on the beaches here. The beaches are all private. There's, I guess you can find some public beaches, but most of them, like this one here, are private. And you pay a fee to go and rent the deck chairs and sit out there. Everybody finished their lunch? Okay. The charter boats that we had do not have holding tanks. And I had 8 guests on board, all of whom showered every morning, did their business, and we're anchored out in front of these swimming beaches. And this is very, very typical. I don't know, I couldn't tell you in any of the marinas that we went into where there would be a pump-out station. If you did have holding tanks, what you would do is just, on your way to the next island, when you're out in the middle, you just empty the tank. But we didn't even have that choice. We just had one great big hose that went from the head straight to its root.
At least it was salt water.
Yeah, it helps a bit. This is the main road in Amalfi. Amalfi back in the 10th and 11th century was actually a republic. There were several maritime republics. Pisa, Genoa, and Venice were the other major ones. Amalfi is a tiny little town, but it was one of these major republics. It was also the furthest south, and so it traded with the Moors in North Africa and the Levant. And that's why you get the Moorish influence. This is actually the tower on the Duomo, and which was built in 1260 or something like that. Next to the Duomo is the Cloister of Paradise, which is a very pretty area. But you can see the Moorish influence on the architecture. After we stayed there, we headed back along the coast. This is one of the little guard towers that go back to medieval times. And we stopped in front of this hotel. This is near Praia. Yes. And again, they wanted to go swimming. And again, you can see the staircase down. Yeah. And from there we went on to Positano. Positano, again, doesn't have a real harbor. There was still some swell from the southwest winds, which had started to back a bit. So it was a little bit rolly. They have mooring balls there, which you can get. And I'm trying to think about what the price was for a mooring ball. It's probably somewhere around 50 or 60 euros for a mooring ball for the evening. So we said, no thanks, and we just went in towards the shore and anchored off. That's the typical nighttime shot that you see of Positano. the Russian group are really into dramatic things, so they had this costume party in one of the beachfront restaurants, and I went along. Of course, I wasn't dressed, and after I paid 12 euros for a beer, I decided, since I really wasn't dressed, and this was a bit out of my league, I would pass on that party. And instead, I got to wander through Positano and up the stairs and everything. Again, if you've been there, the road is way up at the top of the town. So if you want to go down to the waterfront, the only way to get there is to walk. And in our case, because we were at the bottom, we got to walk up. There's a little concrete quay where the water taxis would drop you off, but not really any docking facilities. You couldn't take one of the keelboats in and dock there. It's just impossible. But I got to wander up through the little back streets. I found a little restaurant that was completely deserted. Ordered a margarita pizza, and the wine that we had in Capri, which is made just down the road in a place called Fiori. And the waiter kind of looked at me like, yeah, I like your choice. And so I'm sitting there all by myself enjoying the wine and everything. And then when I was finished, I went back down the laneway, and there's a little bakery, and they had some pastries there, so I thought, oh, I'll have dessert. I walked back down. But they also sold wine there, and guess what? They got the $2 wine. So I bought a couple of bottles there. The next morning, we were heading back to Sorrento, and we woke up and there was this terrible haze. And we realized that there was a fire up on the hill, a brush fire. I'm not sure what the cause was. This is a Canadair 415, which is made by Bombardier in Montreal. And they had two of these water bombers. And what they were doing is they would touch down on the ocean and then pick up their load of water and then fly straight up the mountainside. And it looked like only feet from the mountainside. They would turn straight up and angle and drop their load of water and then back down out over the water to circle around and pick it up. Really impressive show. Our last night we spent in Sorrento again, and we still had this haze, and in the evening, one of the nice things, one of the beautiful parts of Sorrento is we stayed in the Marina Piccolo, which is actually a big harbor. Marina Grande is a little tiny harbor where the fishermen are. The ferries come into the Marina Piccolo, and you walk along the shorefront at the bottom of the cliff, and then there's an elevator that brings you up to a piazza, gorgeous little piazza, which is next door to the Hotel Imperial Tramontana, which goes back to early 1700s. Lord Byron stayed there. A lot of the poets and literary people, gorgeous people place. But we were standing on the shore and looking across at Vesuvius, and there were fires on the slope of Vesuvius. And your first reaction is it erupting? Because that's what it looked like. It looked like lava or something flowing down the side of Vesuvius. Because it was actually brush fires. But still, really impressive and very romantic. These are some of the boats that we passed on our way back to Castellamare. And fortunately, when we got in there, I was talking about the Mediterranean mooring. I aced it the first time in Procida. Not too bad. The second time in Ischia. Botched it completely in Capri. All these guys on the dock screaming at me in Italian, you know. Fortunately, when we got back to Castello Mare, you drive in, and these guys come roaring out in the dinghies like the guy in Amalfi. They hop on the boat and they say, "Okay, go away. We'll take it in," and they dock it, and then we hand it over to them. So anyway, that's pretty much it for my trip to Italy. I don't know if there are any questions that I can answer for people that want to stick around afterwards. Just a couple of small things. We went as far as Amalfi. You can go a little bit further east. You can go to Meori, or you can go to Salerno, although Salerno, I understand, is not that attractive. You can go further south to the Roman ruins, and also, if you want to go up the hillside, there's a place called Ravello, which is spectacular. Going the other way, beyond Ischia and Procida, are Ventotene. Let me just find it here. Ventotene, Isola Ponziana, and Palmarola, which are cruising grounds. But because of the winds and the situation, we originally intended to go to Ventotene, but it was going to be a long slog up and back, and so we passed on that. The Naples area itself is impressive. A lot of people tend to avoid Naples. It's got a reputation as being a place where you're going to get pickpocketed or robbed or whatever. It's got some sketchy areas. You definitely do not want to drive in Naples. That's why we took the train out. Taxi ride back from Castellamare was 70 euros back up to the Naples station. But being in Naples, taking the metro around or taking a taxi in Naples and seeing some of the areas there, they've got some beautiful museums and architecture and everything there. There's also the Campi Flegrei, which are volcanic areas just to the west of the town itself. So you've got thermal springs. There's an old Roman ruin called the Macellum of Pozzuoli, which is the Roman market, and it's got volcanic activity underneath it. On the columns, about 8 feet up, are evidence of growth of mollusks, barnacles, or whatever that used to be on these columns. So at some point in time, that's where the sea level was. And apparently the ground there, on occasion, will go up as high as 1.5 meters because of the magma activity underneath it. And then it goes down again, like not instantly, over a period of time. But it's still very active there. And so, as I say, there's lots to see there. And cruising in that area allows you the opportunity that you don't get if you go with a tour group or whatever. You can spend a whole week there and just really indulge yourself. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments? Yes.
A question in relation with the weather. Like that area is usually very bright and sunny, and the skies didn't look very nice most of the time in your pictures. So I don't know if are the pictures or okay.
You're right. I looked at the slides and I saw that myself. Certainly, the last couple of days, there was a lot of that smoke haze around. But my overall recollection of the week was that it was beautiful and sunny and warm. Going into Forio, yes, you had kind of a cloudy day, but it cleared up and it was quite nice. We were there the second week of September and the weather was just gorgeous. Although I did some looking around and apparently September is the most stormy month for cyclonic activity in the Mediterranean. They get storms coming off the Sahara, and September is the most active month for that, followed by October and November. But the time that we were there, it was perfect. We never had more than 12 knots of breeze. In fact, unfortunately, we had to do a lot of motoring.
I was interested in your comment about the reputation of Naples. I was in that area of Italy in 1966 and did not go to Naples. I went to Vesuvius, but didn't go to Naples because of that reputation. I'm wondering how much of it is just reputation as opposed to actual fact, you know, that it's just lasted for so long. Thank you so much, Dawn. That coastline and the area looks absolutely fabulous. I'm not sure that I could afford to go, though, with the expense, certainly of the marinas, but perhaps the hotels too, although you did seem to find small little restaurants that were reasonable.
The restaurants, yeah. One thing I neglected to mention, when we got back to the home port, Castello di Mare, right across the street was a little restaurant with an outdoor terrace and everything called El Dubbio. And just to back up, when we had all the problems with the boat, our group took off, and Rick and I and a couple of the people went to another little place right on the quayside, and we ordered these big bottles of Peroni beer. But the food itself was really awful. Like, it was just mediocre seafood, some calamari and stuff like that. And they said, "Oh, you got to try the local wine." They brought this jug of wine, which was fizzy, and it was just awful. After that, my experiences were far better, and the little restaurant in Capri on the quayside was breathtaking. The final night we went to El Dubbio, which was across the street, and we had a huge group there, and we said, just bring us seafood, bring us antipasto, just bring whatever you think is good and just keep it coming. And they did. I mean, they loved us. They did, and it wasn't that expensive. It was probably 25, maybe 30 euros a person, all in, you know. And by the way, I said, "Do you have the Piotr wine?" The guy looked at us and said, "No, we can't get it." He says, "Yeah, it's a good wine, but we can't get it here. We're too far down the road."
Thank you so much, Dawn. A little token of our appreciation. We thank you for coming and being here a second time, perhaps another time. Let's give him a nice big round of applause. Next week we have Moose Milk at Nemaco Cruising Club. If you haven't signed up, there's still room. Sign up before you leave. And then we're off for Christmas. And our first day back is January the 3rd.